All right, well, here we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to my live conversation with Alan Maskin, the owner and principal of Olson Kundig and the architect behind Seattle's new Space Needle. The episode just went live this morning, so I'm sure some of you haven't had a chance to listen. A quick tidbit about it. We got a private tour with Alan and got to hear secrets that no one else has heard before. And we also had the chance to sit down with you and kind of learn a little bit more about you as a creative. So, and that was really special. And so I'm going to take this quick time that we have with you to kind of dive a little bit deeper into a few topics that we didn't get to cover.
Great.
And so we'll start it off. Alan, do you have anything you want to start with? Or, okay, I've got a question for you.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring it.
We know you're a very busy person, so thank you so much for taking this time.
Of course.
Was it about this project that kind of piqued your interest?
The Space Needle Project.
Well, actually, about our podcast. We'll start there, and then we'll.
Sorry. Okay. Which project are we talking about?
Yeah. This little podcast that we're doing.
I do a lot of these, and there was, or I get to. I'm fortunate to be able to be in conversation with lots of people in lots of places, and since the pandemic, there's so many modalities that we all are now trained to do and to move through and so on. But yours was the very first where you asked to meet in a place that was inspiring to me. And I thought, well, I'll say the Space Needle, but they're never going to do a podcast up in the Space Needle, but you did. And so, and then we were walking around and talking, and I'd never done a mobile sort of interview before. And I just walked away thinking, boy, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And, but I listened to it last night when you sent me a quick copy, and I'm super critical usually, and I hate, like most people, hate to hear my voice, hate to see myself on screen, but I thought it was really excellent, and now I only want to do walking podcasts from now on.
Well, thank you so much, and that's the podcast magic. I don't know if we can give away our secrets, but it is doable. So. And during our interview, you mentioned that the Space Needle remodel was a dream project, and you got to work with these amazing clients and owners of the property. What was it about? I guess I don't want to give that away, and you kind of go through it, but you said that they kept pushing you. They kept pushing you for bigger and better ideas. What are some ideas and concepts that didn't make it?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to back up to just one of the comments you made, and to start, but I'll circle back to some of the things that fell on the studio floor. But they are a very rare client group, and they had compelled us to. There were going to be so many constraints on this project. Think about it; it's a Seattle landmark. Everybody in Seattle thinks it's theirs personally, that they own it. It's a cultural identity that is tied to this place, and so there were, building codes and so many different sort of thresholds that one would have to move through. But this was a client that basically said, go into your studio, draw, sketch, think, ideate, and we want to see your biggest ideas independent of any criteria that might shut them down. And so, in answer to your question, there's a number of images and sketches and renderings that we were trying before we got to the glass floor, for example. It's the world's first rotating glass floor. And, we didn't just wake up one morning and have that be the case. And so originally we had glass elevators that dropped out of the bottom of the Space Needle, so that, get an elevator, it would drop down and you'd be in a glass cube underneath, and then you would go back up. And that was really sort of far-fetched. And then Olson Kundig has I'm sitting in Olson Kundig studio in Pioneer Square right now, and we have we did a test case here in this building. It's the old Washington Shoe Building, and we actually have a large kinetic skylight that my business partner Tom Kundig designed that is hooked up to the Seattle water system. And so when you turn it on, a gallon of water will open this thing and then release it, and the water then goes into a planter. But we had proposed doing that all around the Space Needle, so that when you and I were walking around, and it was your first visit to the Space Needle.
Yeah.
When we stepped out of the elevator and we were walking around the top floor of the observation deck, imagine if it was covered with glass skylights that could actually open, so that if we were bringing friends and meeting for a drink after work or something, we literally could look at the night sky just like we look at Seattle during the day. So it was trying to sort of, in every instance, we were just trying to expand the lens. And so there were a lot of reasons why that would never make it down the line, but I really credit the Space Needle as a client for, like, that's just some of the many ideas that they just were willing to try, until we got to the real one.
Wow. It's so, I mean, it's so special. You get up there and I can't say enough about that experience.
I don't know that I've ever given a tour to someone in a podcast or in journalism that hadn't ever been there before. And so there was some your reaction when the elevator door opened, for example, and you stepped out. And I was actually really intrigued to step on, you're on a glass floor, 500 feet in the air, and like, wonder how she's going to do here. And if people who listen to it, they'll realize you were quite a champ, and you went the distance there, and you stepped onto the floor. So,
well, I like to consider myself an adventurous person, but there is something about it that you're like, all right. And I was like, I guess I'm with the right person to trust this experience. So, moving on here with our questions.
Sure.
Most of our audience today is from the trade and the design curious.
Great.
Wondering, as an architect, do you prefer to create a space and then hand it over to an interiors team, or do you like to be a part of the whole design?
Yeah, I would definitely skew to the latter on that scenario. And Olson Kundig, we've grown to, we're about 200 people now, Gina, and so we have a interior design department, we have a landscape department. I just described a skylight. We have a kinetics department of people that engineer parts and pieces of buildings that move and so on. So, I mean, you're sitting in a showroom with many samples behind you. I'm 4 feet away from just as many stacks and stacks and stacks of samples and so on. So I do like to be hands-on in every aspect of a project, both inside and outside. But I also work with really smart, talented people who have tremendous expertise in areas that I don't. So this is not to say that we haven't worked with interior designers or graphic designers or other people in the trade. We certainly do that as well. And there's many brilliant, talented people. Most of what Olson Kundig does, much of it, 50% at least, is residential work. And there, sometimes we are designing the interiors, and then other times we're working with really outstanding people. And so there's many trips to the design center. Very often.
That makes me happy. Well, that's fantastic. And quick kind of side note on that, do you have a preference on like commercial or residential projects?
I do, yeah. And so many years ago, shortly after I arrived at for the Seattleites on the call at Olson Kundig, like literally a couple of years after I had been here, there was an opportunity that came up with one of the partners and owners at the time to do some graphic design work up at the Fry Art Museum. And so we went up there together, and I had gone to art school before I went to architecture school. And so he brought me along to work on some graphic design, and designed some banners and things. And then while we were working on that, the property next door became available, and it was Rick Sundberg was the owner at the time, and they turned to us and they said, well, if we were to do a museum edition, what would you do? And so we got together and we did, and I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the background, but I already sort of had relationships, and Rick and I just developed ideas together, and that became Olson Kundig's first sort of independent museum where we weren't working in support of another architect. And it was an amazing experience, and I still love the Fry. So it's a project that had great meaning for me. But I also realized that there was something about that work that was really, really interesting and that I wanted to focus on. And I'm in the minority here because most of my coworkers are extraordinary at residential architecture and interior design. And but I have really tried to promote public work. And I used to be a school teacher, so I working for making projects for kids has been a really important part of my career. And so I work in the more strange and extraordinary arena of projects, which I fit weirdly.
I wasn't going to say that, but it's all very fascinating. And I guess that's a perfect segue to our next question. And that being that we have some aspiring designers and architects on the call here, and we have a
Okay.
school on our property here at the Seattle Design Center.
Yeah.
Something that you learned in architecture school that you still use today, and then what's something that you didn't learn that you wish you would have?
Well, I think that that travel is probably one of the most important parts of education, and I think that's traveling anywhere, not necessarily to, I was living on the East Coast, and I chose to come to the West Coast to go to the University of Washington because it had a good program, and a really good program. But I had also heard, living in Boston, that they have the best foreign study program in the world at the time, and that you would get to go and live in Rome and study architecture. And that to me was a dream. And the woman running the program became probably my most important mentor. And her name was Astra Zarina. And she taught people like Stephen Hall and my business partner, Tom Kundig, and Ed Weinstein, and many, many well-known architects in this area, and was formidable and on many respects. But the thing that I learned from her, probably that was most important, and you witnessed this at the Space Needle, was what it means to make architecture or design that is of its time. And I think some people talk about, this idea of timeless architecture, and I don't believe in that. And what I think that Space Needle is an example of, when you and I were walking, was I was showing you the parts and pieces that were left from 1962, but what we added, in the last couple of years, is of this time, the technology of this time, the construction techniques and the values of this time. And those are two very different things. And so the way to work with history and to design with history, from my perspective, is actually to understand, I told you how we crawled around and we went underneath the floors and we looked through holes in the floors and so on, trying to really understand the logic of the original design so that we could build on it and make something that was unlike anything else. So in that respect, I feel like I learned from Astra and from the examples of living in a city like Rome, seeing modern architects doing really brilliant projects adjacent to historic buildings, or a part of them, or transforming them. In terms of what I didn't learn, I didn't realize how much doing this, what you and I are doing, was part of the job. That you need, that you will go back to universities and you will lecture students, you will pitch ideas to clients, and then you will talk with media and people in the world of media. And I never took a class on public presentations. I never so we have an international internship program at Olson Kundig where we have people that apply from all over the world who are newly graduated to come and work with us. And it's a 6-month program, and they're paid positions, and it's full of mentorship, and every week different things happen. But one of the things we require of them is exactly the thing that I didn't get in answer to your question, which is they have to get up and speak and present their own work from school or their thesis or to the entire office of 200 people. And it's scary. I mean, we started this program, there was 25 of us, but now it's, you can tell that they're nervous, but something really important happens when they do this lecture, that like their shoulders go from like here to here, and suddenly they sort of fit into the firm in a way and are seen in a way that's really valuable. That opportunity didn't exist for me. I had to kind of figure out how to do my best along the way.
That's really special. That is, that you give, that opportunity and that knowledge to those interns. And I guess if anyone watching is interested in your intern program, what would be the best way to get information?
They should go to our website, and there's instructions on the internship program specifically, and there's interns for both the architecture studio and interiors as well. And
Great.
so definitely scope it out. But if I were to give you one like hint of like how to, because it we can get sometimes as many as 30 applications for each position. Sure. There's about 12 positions. Is really to make the best portfolio. We really hire on people that have a design sensibility and have visuals and so on. And then if anybody has Revit training, that also moves them to the head, because now even in the interiors department, that is an expectation that people should try to get underway. So if you're still in school, try to get that if you can.
Yeah, you heard it here. That's great advice. And so we've got a few more questions here, and
sure.
I know that you're very busy. You got an offsite meeting, so we'll keep things moving along. Great. If you could visit one place, one building in the whole world right now, time travel, just, where would it be?
Boy, it's I think that I haven't ever been able to get to the Middle East, and it's very sort of, it's basic architectural history from school, but the pyramids for me are just extraordinary and brilliant and beautiful and mysterious and poetic and spiritual, and there's just so many facets of them as memorials. I love them in section. I love them. I would love to walk inside of some of them, or just stand in a landscape and experience them. So, I mean, there's so many buildings that I still have to go see, but getting to Giza would probably be one that would be pretty high on the list.
That would be so cool. Yeah, I agree with you. I'll go with you. Okay.
Okay, we'll do a podcast.
Yeah, we'll do a podcast from a pyramid. Yeah, exactly. That would be really cool.
Okay, it's plan.
So quick question on kind of innovation here. Smart houses, sustainability, 3D printing have all become familiar ideas and concepts. What do you think is the next big advancement in architecture and design?
I am sitting next door to just beyond that wall over there is a virtual reality studio, and what we've been experimenting with in the last few years has been literally we're all designing projects in the computer in 3 dimensions, and then what is it like to put the headsets on a client and have them walk into their museum or their home and walk around and experience it. And it's not as great as it is like walking into the Space Needle with you was. You won't feel the cold wind in your face or the texture of the materials, but it's pretty amazing to watch the smiles come on their faces when they suddenly can realize, because we work in a discipline where we're showing plans and elevations and sometimes perspectives or renderings, but it's definitely a magical moment when they can literally not only walk around, but look at the things they want to look at. They can control where they're going. I want to go upstairs and look at the second floor. That piece, I think, has been pretty fascinating.
That'd be really cool. Really cool. And then, our last question here, and then we have a few questions in the Q&A we might pop into if you're okay with that. But
of course,
self-care, and especially, for everybody, is very important, especially for creative minds. Where's your favorite place to recharge?
Well, my partner lives out in Port Townsend, and that's where I've been for the past 14 months. And so I haven't been living an urban life. It's been quite rural. And so nature and, being able to be on the coast has been, a really, really important part. But I would also say that the place I went to during the pandemic that was a refuge for me was drawing. And I started because doing Zooms, and I'm sure everybody experiences this. You know, you turn on the cameras at 8 and you go until 7, and it takes a different kind of energy than just going to meetings and practice used to. And so what I found is that I started to get up earlier just to draw on projects and design and sketch, and that I would go into this kind of zone of creativity. And for me, it was a refuge, and it wasn't about politics. It wasn't about diseases or viruses. It was about just creative imagination at play. And I returned to all those things as soon as I finished, but it was nice to have a break from that. And it definitely was rejuvenating for me.
I bet. Good for you for like being like, well, I'll get up earlier. That's, not saying I don't have time, it's like, all right. That's great. All right. So I'm going to pop into the Q&A here real quick.
Sure.
Do you have anything that, you want to add on, or should we just go right into some other people?
Let's go to questions, see what people have any.
Great. And if anyone on here, any of our listeners and viewers, please put your questions in the Q&A. I know there's some comments in the chat as well, and I'll try and get to those. But so this is from an anonymous attendee. How do you use storytelling to sell architectural concepts to clients?
I love that question.
Yeah.
So all of my projects, everything I'm working on, is embedded in storytelling. And I think that I actually became a designer for that reason. And so some of the projects that I've done are actually based on specific pieces of literature, like the projects about Noah's Ark, for example. And but I've had a client that they have a fantastic client in South Korea, and she owns a series of sort of a fashion department sort of company, and she does these department stores, and her family has done them since the 1920s, and they're very elegant and beautiful. But she wanted me to make a sort of high-end food court that was based on a film that she had seen, and it was a Wong Kar-wai, the Chinese director's film, called In the Mood for Love, which is the translation. And it's about unrequited love. And so the challenge of designing a food court into a movie about love that never got realized was probably one of the greatest challenges I've ever had. And it was constantly about the notion of weaving story and trying to create cinematic space in a way that you could literally walk into. We've also spent some time doing research and projects, and then turning them into stories. And if the person who asked that question is a designer, there's a great competition called the Fairy Tales competition. And it is all about combining architecture with narrative. And you have to write a story as well as submit designs and renderings. And I got to go home out to Port Townsend and write a science fiction story. And then we illustrated it with a team of people here. It was one of the most fun things we worked on. We then turned it into a film, and then we turned it into a graphic novel. And there are 1,500 entries, but we won. And it was actually transformative for us in a way. And so, I mean, I can go on and on and on about this, but narrative for me is hugely inspiring. And honestly, there isn't a presentation or a lecture I give that isn't through the lens of a narrative arc, where I want to start here, I want to move here, I want to come back to this. And so it really infiltrates everything I do.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And if someone wants to find that competition, there is a TED Talk with you about it. And then you also have, where can they find, I watched the film, but I forgot, is it on your website?
Yeah, if you go to the website and you want to look for The Fifth Facade, I think is the project that you will get to, and it should all be covered there.
Yes, everyone, if you're on here, you need to go watch it. It was very profound. Yeah, I loved it.
And it's about the death of a senior citizen architect living in Seattle who has a business in Pioneer Square, and just some unusual similarities, and he loses his head in the process.
It's a great plug. Yeah, it's great. Another question here quickly is, aside from your firm in the Pacific Northwest, which firm do you admire their work?
Do you think, are they asking about firms here in this region or firms around the world?
Both. I mean, they specifically asked for the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay.
Here, but if you have someone else around the world too, then.
Sure. Well, I'll go to one firm that I love here, and although there are many, and they're friends, and we compete against them occasionally. But the Pacific Northwest is a small community, I think, and so I would say that Miller Hull Partnership, and I studied with Dave Miller and knew Bob Hull. When I came out here to become a student, and now I'm, friends, and I actually meet with different principals and leaders from that firm every couple of months, we just compare notes about what it means to run in a firm. But I also really admire their work and their commitment to sustainability and their leadership in that regard. And they've been, anyway, I'm a big fan. If I were to go more globally, I think that there's a bunch of them, but I think Liz Diller from Diller Scofidio Renfro is a really brilliant designer, and I pay a lot of attention to what she's up to. I think David Adjaye, who's an architect whose office is, I think, in London. I just lost the competition to David Adjaye, and so
you still admire him. That's good.
I should be very bitter, but if you have to lose to an architect whose work you admire, then I think that it makes it a little bit less painful. And then Thomas Heatherwick is just someone who gets to work on the most fantastic projects, and I admire those as well. Great.
And we have one more question here, if you have time, if that's
sure.
From Jeremy. He said, or she, sorry, they said, I just got an internship in Rome for this summer.
Awesome.
What's a must-see piece of architecture that is more personal to you, maybe more off the beaten path?
Okay. So first of all, lucky you and congratulations. And actually, I'm giving a lecture at the University of Washington this week with one of the history professors there. And it's Kira, I know if you could possibly put it in the chat, if there's a link to it. My colleague Kira has also put in a link to our website if you want to go look at some of the narrative stuff that I was talking about moments ago. But when I went there, it was 1984, so like a century ago, or 88 actually. And I decided that because I'd gone to art school and architecture school, that I wasn't just going to focus on architecture. And so I went there in search of one person's paintings. And so you may know the Renaissance painter Caravaggio. I decided I would find every Caravaggio that was in Rome. And if you're taking notes, write down that there is a church in the very north entry to the walled-in city of Rome, and it's right there as part of the gate. And this will make sense to you when you're there. And it's in one of the in the alcoves of the church, and the church is open like weird hours, and you've got to keep going back and keep drawing. But I promise you, if you find this mural in the back of this church, it will blow your mind.
Wow. That's a great little scavenger hunt to send.
Oh, you know what? I have to do one more. You have to get on a train and go north and figure out a way to get to a town called Civita di Bagno Reggio. So Civita, and then Bagno, Bagno, Reggio, Reggio. It's a small hill town. You'll have to figure out how to get there and Google it and look at it, and you'll want to go there. It's and there's a great fellowship all of you can apply for years from now, where you could actually go and live there if you have a really great idea to study. And I think it's one of the greatest fellowships in the world. And the spelling is now in the chat. Kira, I'm never doing this again without you. You're putting in all the footnotes. So everybody should go look at that, and everybody should go there. So.
Wow, that's great. Do you have time for a quick last one?
I do, yes.
Okay. So Sheila would like to know, can you speak about Martin's Lane Winery in Kelowna, BC? I butchered that. I'm so sorry.
It's Kelowna, yes. It's just, so my business partner, Tom Kundig, designed it. And if you guys look, Kira will probably put something. It just won a national AAA award. It's one of my favorite projects that Tom has done. It's on a hill. It moves with the hill, and it makes wine, but it actually it uses gravity and the moving downhill to actually support the making of the wine process. So it's not only a visitor center and a tasting room, it's also literally a working machine that helps, that assists them in the making of the wine. And I'm glad you asked me about the project, because I think it's pretty great.
Wow.
And if you want to look at it, it's in the chat.
Again, everyone, please get all the information in the chat. Alan, I could talk to you forever. I could listen to your voice forever. If you haven't listened to the episode, it's live now everywhere you can get your podcasts. You can head to the Seattle Design Center website. All the links are there. We've got special behind the scenes photos. And one last tidbit about the podcast that I thought was so fascinating is after we were done recording, we were down with some of the representatives from the Space Needle, and they had mentioned to me that you brought up things in our tour that they had never heard before. And you told some stories, and they were super excited about it. So yeah, so go listen to the episode. You'll get those stories. You'll get a little bit more insight on Alan, and you were just a gem. Alan, thank you so much.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much. And good luck, everybody. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.